Alrighty, right. Another Tim Cain reaction. This time, what is an immersive sim? One of my favorite genres of games. And you know what? I think it's a lot like RPGs. Defining an immersive sim feels like it should be exist on a spectrum of things that define an immersive sim. Well, let's see what Tim has to say, because Tim has worked on a lot of immersive sims. That's his bread and
Hi,
butter.
everyone. It's me, Tim.
Hey, Tim.
Today, I want to talk about what is an immersive sim. Definitions are hard. I almost didn't want to make this video, but Shadow the Cat 7
Definitions are
actually joined my channel as a master member to not only have me answer this, but push it in the queue.
Okay.
So here we go. Shadow the Cat 7 asks, I was wondering, what is Tim Cain's definition of an immersive sim? I don't think I've heard you mention them at all, but it seems like there's a lot of debate around the subject. There's not just a lot of debate over what an immersive sim is. There's a lot of debate about what anything is. I have an entire video devoted to what a cup is. I'll link it below.
Did we watch that? I think we did watch that
beg you,
one.
if you want to keep talking about what a cup is, please confine it to that video. The point of the video is to show you that something as simple and physically available to everyone on the planet as a cup can still suffer from being hard to define. Having said that, I did make a video called What is an RPG? where I defined what a role-playing game was to me, because so many of my
It was a good video.
and hundreds of videos are me talking about role-playing games, because that's pretty much all I've made since 1993.
Well, it's such a contentious tag, because you'll have games like you'll have a game like Borderlands being tagged with RPG. I remember that being one that was initially contentious. And some people will say, well, yeah, it is. Like, you have upgrades, you get to play a character, you have, randomized loot, skills and stuff, and yeah, it's an RPG. But from a lot of definitions of what an RPG is, it's not an RPG. Not really. And that's really what it comes down to. It's like, what is an RPG? What is an immersive sim? Where you have immersive sims on one end, like Kingdom Come Deliverance, but then you have other games like System Shock, and it's like, well, are these the same thing? One does provide you with a lot of more freedom on how to solve things, one less freedom, but then one is more of a role-playing game with immersive sim elements. One is more of an immersive sim with some role-playing elements. What is which? Make it simple music. If you're black, it's either hip hop or R&B. No, worse yet, C-Spawn. They call it rap. It's all rap. God, there are a lot of subgenres. I think you make a good point. Like, hip hop is such and R&B are both just these broad spectrums that encompass decades of, this. I'm not even an expert on this, but it like goes all the way back from like soul to then going to like R&B, and then funk, and then G-funk, and old school hip hop, and then modern hip hop, and everybody just says if it has a rap track, it's rap. Seen them even call radio host rappers. I don't know, but it's the same kind of thing. It is absolutely the same kind of thing. It's like you use the term that is most universally understood. And for a lot of people, unfortunately, when you say rap music, everybody has a general understanding. Even if I tell you rap music, at least we kind of are in the right ballpark, but it's not the most accurate. Like, I wouldn't define old school G-funk as rap music. It's absolutely not. Yeah, metal's a good one too. Metal, or like rock music. Yep. I think we see it in a lot of cases because people I think it's like a human thing. We just like to be reductive in order to understand things, right? It's like finding the simplest way to communicate something that when you go into the nuance is not as simple. I mean, even when you're pitching a game to a publisher, they'll say, okay, what's your game like? And it's like, okay, well, it's like this game plus this game, but if you took the unique aspect of game B and made it the most prominent feature. And it's like, well, that's not really what the game is, but it's a way to understand it at like surface level understanding. Lil Nas X got on a horse and they called it country. Oh boy.
So I made that video hoping against hope to stem the tide of people arguing about what an RPG was rather than the application of that definition to a particular game. By the way, it didn't seem to help, so I'm not sure this one's going to help, but let's try anyway.
Let's go for it.
So, immersive simulations, to me, also called immersive sims, also called ImSims, are a type of game that have these features. One, it has many basic rules on how the world works.
Yes.
It's pretty much that simple. Things aren't scripted as special cases. There's a lot of general rules saying, like, this damage type does this. This type of attack has this kind of effect.
Yeah, it's, you know, because that's the foundation, I would say, of just making, sorry for pausing it all the time, but to me, that's the foundation of making emergent gameplay, is to have these rules. And, you know, it's like you're creating a sandbox. And so it's like, what do you need for a sandbox? Well, you need rules for it. You need to set things up and tell the player, here's tool A, B, C, and D. This is what you have to reach. This is what you have to do. This is where your army men need to conquer. Have fun. That's it. That's the thing. We made this rule. We made the levels. We have some ideas of ways to handle it, but honestly, this is your oyster.
Then the second thing is those rules interact with each other to create a large number of emergent systems, which I would define as features that were not necessarily intended. They might have been, but they weren't necessarily intended by the original designers.
Yep.
But they result from the application of those basic rules together. By the way, I think Will Wright is the master of making simple basic rules that interact with each other and create a lot of emergent properties. But I don't want to digress into Will Wright and his games. He makes great games, though. And then my third part of my ImSim definition would be the player, as well as everything else in the world, follows those rules. I think those three things are what make an ImSim.
Yeah, because it's like you're creating understanding, right? You're creating... It's predictability, but in a way that kind of engages you, like, mentally, right? If you know how the rules work, and you're just told this is your objective, this is your tool set, this is the way the rules work, and everything in the world follows those rules. That's where the true emergence comes from. It's the strategy. It's the strategization, strategy. It's the creation of strategy that allows you to reach that objective through any means necessary. I saw a really great tweet the other day, or this morning, where somebody was showing off Prey. I bet I can find it. I don't think I liked it. I never like the things that I should like. Prey. But if I just search that, I'm not going to find... You know what? I found it. I found it immediately. Let me show you this. So this is one of those things where you have this tool in Prey that allows you to make foam, and you can bounce things off of that foam. That's all you need to know. This goo. So placing goo down to bounce a Nerf dart off of it to open a door. Peak ImSim mechanics right there. Peak. Perfect. That's all you have to do. That's it. I mean, and it's so simple from like a design standpoint that it trips up a lot of game designers when making ImSim elements. Like, we're working on an immersive sim here at Microraptor as well. It's a long-term project that we're working on in the background. But it's just, we have the ability to pick up objects, to rotate them as you're holding them, and to toss them. That there is enough. Now we need to create interesting levels that we may or may not have thought about with this tool in mind. And that's just one tool. You might be able to attach objects to other objects. Well, now what happens if you pick up that object, rotate it, and throw it with object 1 attached to object 2? That's where the emergent gameplay can really shine, but you need to create situations where that's used or usable and not script a place where it like forces you to do that, because then it's not emergent if you force the player to do action A in order to overcome problem X. It's not emergent, that's scripted.
Having more of those features makes you more of an MSim. And because of that, and I said the same thing in my RPG video, which is here's all my things of features that I think make up an RPG, and if you have more of them, you're more of an RPG to me. What that means is RPGs and MSims overlap frequently.
Yeah, they have some
They're
crossover.
not separate types of games, they're not separate genres. They're a way of describing a game, and because they can have features in common, they can overlap. If you have an RPG that has a lot of systemic effects because of its rules, then that RPG is also well along the MSim continuum.
Yeah, I mean, think of a game like that would allow you to choose your, like, let's say a fantasy game that would allow you to choose your role. So you can play as like a blacksmith, right? And you don't really have great combat ability, but you're strong. You can pick stuff up. This allows you to play the role. You are doing the role-playing game thing, right? Now you have an immersive sim that allows you to take out enemies. And you can take them out just by fighting them, by stealth attacking them, or by knocking them out or something. And it's like, well, as a blacksmith, I might pick up something heavy and throw it at a goblin to kill him. I'm not really good at shooting a bow. I can swing a sword okay, but I'm also, not trained in like defense stuff very well. I don't have a lot of good armor, but I can throw things. And so that's that combination of you get to be you have a role-playing game, understandable rules, everything follows those rules, and now your immersive sim allows the player to take advantage of those rules to overcome generic obstacles, right? And generic here is not a bad thing, it's just you have pack of goblins, how do you deal with them, right? Ask yourself in the way that you would do it with like a D&D game. You come across a pack of goblins, how do you guys deal with them? And that's where that kind of like, that's where like tabletop RPGs had immersive sim elements, but it was just considered, like a tabletop role-playing game. And it's this translation of those rules and mechanics into a digital space. And that's where kind of that element of what makes an MSim RPG the most like a tabletop RPG is where you have that freedom to overcome obstacles the way that you see fit or the way that you think is the most optimal.
If your MSim has player agency, meaning I get to make my own character in that MSim with their own kind of like sets of skills and maybe a background and all that, then that MSim is along the RPG continuum.
Tim said
my own RPGs have MSim elements in them. One thing I know I talk about a lot is, let's say you want to get by a door. Well, you can pick the lock if you have a lock picking skill, and maybe you have lock picks, or you can go buy them, or maybe you can go find the key. Maybe you can steal it from an NPC using pickpocket. Maybe you can bribe them to give you the key. Maybe you can talk them into giving you the key. Maybe you can lie to them and say, oh, I lost my key and I'm supposed to have a key. Give me your key. Maybe you can kill them and take it off their dead body and get the key. Or maybe you don't even worry about keys. You break the lock, or you break the door, or you break the wall next to the door.
God, Tim is
if
way too
all
good
of
at this.
these are handled by basic rules in the game, then you can find a way in. You can get past that door, which is your goal. All I said is you want to get past this door.
Yep.
You can get past that door.
Generic
and
goal.
the game doesn't care how you did it and has provided you a lot of different ways of doing it. Just do it. My RPGs, I like to fill with things like that.
I think that it's important to mention too that the reason why that is so rewarding is because not only does it allow for the player to play multiple different ways to achieve the same goal, but it enables the player to actually role play, to get into the role play. So they can say, well, I'm playing this really persuasive character who tries to talk his way out of combat at any opportunity. He's got that silver tongue. So being able to talk to somebody and persuade them into giving you the key to open the door reinforces the role play that you're getting into, because otherwise it takes you out of that. It creates the dissonance between, hey, you get to play the way that you want, but also you need to play this specific way. Nobody wants that. That's not a true role playing experience. And I think an immersive sim on top, the immersive sim element on top of that would be, things that like physics are a big one, or platforming, ways that the developer almost, it feels like they didn't intend for you to do it that way, but they didn't stop you from doing it either. I think that's what bridges the gap between you had the option to do this and you can clearly see that the developer intended you to do it that way, versus I don't know if the developers intended me to do this, but it felt damn good to do it that way anyway. And that's a really tough thing to create in the players, is to make them feel as if they discovered something for the first time. Or is that something becomes so big that you can see those influences everywhere? Yeah, yeah, you can. Yeah. Kind of just a natural evolution of something becoming popular like that. You can describe San Andreas as an RPG sim. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely you can. I think that a lot of modern games have lost the we could say lost the plot of like what I think that a lot of games have said that they want to create emergent systems, but by the but they don't create those. They just say, oh, our game has emergent gameplay, and then they show an example of the game developers clearly intending you to solve this puzzle in like two ways, and they say it's emergent gameplay because you have choices. And it's just, you have to almost, if you're like a modern designer, you have to go back to the classics, go back to the old games, or play some sessions of D&D to realize what emergent gameplay actually is. It's often very simple objectives with very understandable tools. You have high platform you need to reach. How do you reach it? And you need to reward creativity, or just not disallow the player from doing things that may be unconventional. Like maybe throwing 10 sticky turrets on the wall to climb on them is not the most optimal way to do it. But I'll tell you what, somebody will do it. Somebody will. Because they don't want to waste other resources, like their goo gun, for instance, with Prey. Maybe they don't have a lot of goo. Maybe they ran out of goo. Whatever reason it is, players will find a way to do things optimally or suboptimally. And honestly, that it's such a wide subjective viewpoint of what is efficient and non-efficient, because when you have a game with like resources and different ways of playing it, or different challenge runs, that subjectivity changes what is efficient and inefficient completely. They'll even patch it out because it was unintended. Yes, yeah, they will. They absolutely will. But and that's the danger, where it's like, especially with balance, that happens a lot in balance, where designers will patch something out because of it being unintended. But if you remove one meta, a meta still exists. You just haven't discovered it yet, or you aren't thinking about it. And if you patch out all the metas, the game doesn't become fun anymore. It just becomes a linear experience, where there's only one proper way to do something, and that's the way that the designer intended it to be done. And I will say that that doesn't necessarily make a game unfun, right? There's a lot of great linear story-driven games where you have an entrance and an exit, and you have some grenades and some guns, and you just beat the level, right? There's a little bit of choice and action and moment-to-moment decision making, but you're meant to go from point A to point B and then to point C, and that's the entire game. Those are great. Uncharted is a good example. Fun games, great games, linear. But if you want to reward emergent gameplay, you say, here's your objective, here's your tools, the level is your sandbox. And how you just do it is up to you. Balancing a single player game post release is just nonsense. I disagree, but I understand your point. Your point is not changed. But for me, I think it requires nuance in, is the player being rewarded for doing something that required skill, strategy? These are two great things, right? If you find a unique way, a unique pathway up to your goal that is very difficult to do, right? Like requires difficult platforming, multiple failures, and the player does it and says, "Wow, that was tough. but fun. Don't balance the shit. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Leave it. But if it's like so easy that the player accidentally clicks something and it warps them up to the highest level, it's like, okay, well, we got to patch that. That's not intended, and it breaks the flow of the game. It doesn't really enable you or encourage you to go out of your way to be skillful or strategic. Imagine Skyrim being released today, all the exploits would be patched out of all those exploits. They were smart. They were smart about not removing the exploit. But some of them, let's say you made like iron daggers, and iron daggers were so much more efficient than anything else, to the point that you got like 20 times the XP that you currently do. Well, people would literally just make iron daggers, and they would feel that smithing is useless, and they aren't encouraged to do anything else, or to even try anything. Leaving the iron dagger exploit in is okay, but it does need to be balanced in a way that is not so overly disproportionate to other methods. It's about like, reach for like this layer of balance and optimal gameplay, and then balance everything within that graph. That makes sense.
Now, you'll notice that some of those things I mentioned about how to get by the door were added by level designers. They had to make the lock. They had to make the key. They had to associate the key and the lock. Then they had to put the lock on the door and the key on in an inventory somewhere, whether it's in a chest or whether it's in a player or an NPC. But some of some of those ways past the door are just automatic. Just the rules of the game automatically allow you to break things like doors.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's a spell that warps wood or bends stone, and therefore you can get by the door using that. Nothing was special done. Nothing was it. The spell says I affect anything made of wood, and the door says material type wood. Once that's in there, those two basic rules, this is what a material type I'm made of, and this is what my spell does to things of that material type, give you a way past the door. That's
and it's like somebody will play a woodmancer in that game. Somebody will try to do it. I mean, take a look at how many different types of playthroughs there are to, for instance, Skyrim, as we were talking. Skyrim, but I am not allowed to use weapons or spells, and it's like you have to beat the game through alternative means of like companions, or dealing damage through like physics objects. Like, it's not optimal, but you can do it, and so therefore somebody will do it. It's like Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law is not everything that bad that can happen, will happen. It's anything that can happen will happen. And so, you need to think about that when you're like making an immersive sim, is create tools, enable the usage of them, and just let them exist. Let them exist. Even something as simple as picking up and throwing objects. Or look at a game like Dark Messiah of Might and Magic. Allow people to kick and ragdoll NPCs. Now, how can you use this to solve puzzles in creative ways? Skyrim, but cannot be Stealth Archer. I give up. It's like those memes where you like look at something, but then the picture distorts and it becomes something else. That's Skyrim, and what it always becomes a Stealth Archer. You'll start off playing spells, and you'll end up with a bow in your hands, stealthing in dungeons every time. I don't even try anymore. I'm just like, I'm gonna be a Stealth Archer again. It is what it is.
An ImSim way past the door. In that sense, if RPGs are simulations of a world, and some of the solutions to some of the things you're trying to solve in that RPG are through the simulation, then that RPG is very ImSim.
Yep.
However, I've never considered my RPGs as ImSims. First of all, I was making RPGs before the word ImSim even got invented.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. It's like, back then it was just tabletop RPGs, and the first people trying to make games were the nerds who were playing tabletop RPGs. And what was the first games they tried to make? Were like text adventure games, right? Like, look at fountain, use needle on fountain. It's like these were games with tools, rules, and the sandbox. And they were trying to recreate that tabletop experience with very limited technology and capability from the hardware, right? But nowadays we can try to achieve that. But even back then, we were making great immersive sims like Deus Ex and old school RPGs, and System Shock is another great one. It's just this is what people were making, and these are immersive sims or Vampire.
But also, the very elements that make something an ImSim are the ones that I think also make good RPGs, like using systemic rules.
Yes.
So they overlap. But I used systemic rules because I thought it led to a good RPG, not because I was like, I'm making an ImSim. But also bear in mind that a lot of my RPGs contain a lot of scripts, handwritten scripts by people, a lot of dialogues, which in a sense are just handwritten scripts with a lot of text that gets emitted by an NPC. But there's a lot of scripting that goes on behind the scenes, which is why, you can say certain things to NPCs because you have certain traits, or NPCs respond to reactions because there's a lot of scripting going on in that dialogue. It's all hand done by designers.
It's about enabling the roles.
That is not ImSimmy. That is very hand of the designer stepping in and making the game react to things they want the game to react to that a systemic rule isn't covering.
A good example is Cauldron Chronicles, right? We had 25 or something, or 20. I don't think it was 25. I think it was closer to 20 effects. And you could make any potion with any combination of effects and give it to NPCs. Well, a lot of our time was spent writing dialogue and having outcomes for NPCs based on those effects because you could give them anything. That was the immersive sim element to it, was that you are an alchemist. Here's your toolkit. Here are your tools.
I swear to God, if you open up Cauldron Chronicles one more time, I'm going to send Delta Force.
I'm not going to open it. I promise I'm not going to open it. I'm just going to talk about it, okay? You could make any potion you want. That was why we wanted you to be this to be an RPG with immersive sim elements. You are playing the role of an alchemist. You can do anything you want, make any potion you want, give any potion you want to an NPC. But like Tim says, all of that comes with requirements to have the world react to that. Did we show it off in the best way? No. But it did exist. The design is still there, and I want to return to that game at some point.
Also, the player in my games is often immune to the very rules that you think the world has. I've made games where the player is the chosen one. In fact, I've made fun of that trope. The player is the only one who gets certain powers. The player is the only one who can use these certain items, can solve these puzzles, can get into these areas, because they're the chosen one.
Now, that was another thing with Cauldron Chronicles, was like, no, you're not the chosen one. You're literally just an NPC. You make potions for people, for the chosen ones.
Been picked by gods, or they're the only remaining ancestor of this person who had the abilities, or maybe they just were the ones who picked a short straw in a lottery, but they're the chosen one and they're the only ones who get to do these things. Also, a lot of my games, a lot of my RPGs have unique rules for players. I have a whole video about that. All these videos are linked down below. In that the player can do things that NPCs can't. Frequently what that's done is the player is immune to certain things.
Well, it's because the player is meant to win. Like, that's the purpose of you open the game, or like a game like that, because you have the intention of winning. So you have to break the rules sometimes, even with any game. You have to break the rules sometimes because the player is, if the player followed the same rules as NPCs, then the player would die and the game would be over. Like, that would be it. We can't have that. Of course there's like permadeath modes and stuff like that, but that's generally not the main way to play the game, right? The player is meant to have agency, so the player can use items. And oftentimes the player is meant to use more items and in higher frequency than the NPCs, because if you fought a boss that just had 99 healing potions like you, like let's say the boss character was meant, I mean, this might be a funny idea for a game, but the boss character literally gets ready to fight you at the same time that you are preparing to fight the boss. And so if you spend 100 hours, then we have to simulate 100 hours of the boss going around obliterating enemies, building health potions, and buying really good items, so that when you face him, you have to face a boss with 200 health potions and the best armor and weapons. It's funny, but I don't think most players would like it because they want to win the game, and that's not going to make them win the game.
about making players immune to being paralyzed or knocked out, mainly because that is not fun to play.
Yes.
Players love knocking out NPCs,
Oh,
but
yeah.
they don't love themselves being knocked
Like
out.
freezing
Players
effects.
love paralyzing NPCs,
Yeah.
but it's not fun when your player character is paralyzed and then you just watch a lot of things happen. It basically takes away player agency, which I think is important for RPGs, but I never listed that as important for an ImSim. So I think, though, too many people, now that I've made a definition, which you all can argue about and will, I predict, I think too many people have rigid definitions. Something they do it in a binary way. This either is or isn't an RPG. This it is or isn't an ImSim.
Your game doesn't have XP and levels, therefore it's not an RPG. I mean, I heard that when making Cauldron Chronicles.
I think that's a bad thing because the reason I do it on a continuum is here's a bunch of things that make up something like this, and the more of these features you have, the more of this you are.
Well, okay, I'll even expand on that because Tim is 100% right about this, but it's also that I've seen a lot of designers get stuck in the thinking that we are making an RPG, therefore we must have this thing, or we're making any genre of game, therefore we must pull the most popular, well-known, well-liked experiences from other games because those games succeeded and they had those systems. Therefore, if our game has those systems, our game will succeed too. And there's no further thought to it of, well, does this fit with the world? Does this make sense? Is this actually fun to engage with? Does this game need this system? Or can we think of a system that is more immersive for the world we're trying to make and story we're trying to tell that can also be new? Because then that becomes a selling point, right? If you make I'm not going to use the example from earlier. I'm not going to tell you if you're watching this YouTube video. It's an R-rated game, let's just say, or adult-only game. But let's just say you're making a game about washing cars. And you want to have a system where the harder the player scrubs, the more soap that gets... you have to force the player to move their mouse up and down a lot or something, and this increases the suds and the how fast something gets wiped off. I don't know, it's just something like that, because then you can show that in a trailer and it looks unique because another game doesn't have it. Not a good example, I apologize. But think of it in the way of, Tim says it a lot. Make your world, make your setting, your characters, and then populate that with systems, not the other way around. And I've made that mistake too, and I think Tim's right. It's much easier to do that because you just hit selling points way faster, way easier.
I think when people make it binary and say this is or isn't this thing, they artificially restrict what they play based on their own rigidity. And the only people who suffer because of that, ironically, is them.
Yeah.
And they will argue that no, you got to have standards, or I only like RPGs, and therefore I know I hate that game. I don't have to play it because I already know in advance I hate it.
Okay, devil's advocate though. Devil's advocate, Tim, and you might agree with this or might not. If your game is so lacking in understanding that players don't get a sense that, oh, this game is definitely meant for me because it looks like it's meant for people who like this game XYZ, there are a lot of people that will just not buy the game because they will fear that this isn't for them, or that they will be afraid of trying something new out of fear that they're going to be wasting their money and time. I can understand that from that perspective, where it's like, well, I only have 2 hours to play today, or this is the only weekend that I have free. And, I can play all weekend, but it's this only weekend. Do I try the new thing that looks like I might not like it? Or should I try this thing that looks way safer for me? That at the very least, I should like the gameplay, even if the story isn't that great. A lot of people will choose the second option just because it's safer. I mean, that's also why, like, with publishing deals, it's like, well, what's your game like? Give me 2 games that this plays similarly to. It's the familiarity.
But let me give you an example. If I made a pure ImSim RPG,
Do it.
then I think it would have to have a story that emerged entirely from world rules that designers made, but not imposed in any special cases by designers, and especially script writers and narrative designers in any way. In other words, the story is completely emergent.
Way.
The rules are set, the player is pushed into the world, and anything that happens after that is not preset. It pops out of the rules.
Tim would probably make a game like RimWorld, Sims, or Dwarf Fortress, from what he's describing. Games with just rules. Like, I think that what's his name, Tinnen Sylvester or something, creator of RimWorld, says it the best, which is that RimWorld, he describes it as a story generator, based on the player's actions and choices. And I mean, that's exactly what it is. And it's a very popular genre of games, but a very difficult one to make, especially a difficult one to have a vertical slice for, because it's all systems driven. You can't just make one level and test if the game is fun. You need to make every system and test if they're fun in combination, right? If you provided the right tools in order to build everything. It was the same thing with Golden Chronicles. It was like, well, our game is emergent in a lot of these cases. We need to actually just see if they're fun in combination with each other. And some were, some weren't. But it took a long time to get to that point where we could actually feel like everything was there. And I don't even think we properly reached that point. I'm not going to talk about Golden Chronicles anymore.
Will we ever have a game like an RPG like that that's a pure ImSim? I don't know. Am I talking about an advanced AI? Not necessarily. But is any complex rule system an AI? I don't know. You want to make a video defining an AI, and I'll answer you. In fact, the funniest short I ever made is one about a D&D Koan. I recommend you watch it. I'll link it. It'll be the last video linked on this video. I recommend you watch it so that Uncle Tim doesn't have to come and beat you over the head with a Fiend Folio.
My God, he's got an AD&D Fiend Folio?
So that Uncle Tim doesn't have to come and...
That's amazing. The good old TSR logo, AD&D Fiend Folio. Shit, I remember that. Man, that was stuff like my dad loved to look at with me and my Yeah, but I agree with Tim. Like, for me, all this talk about like integrating AI into games has been so boring, because everybody just talks about generative AI. Like, oh, let's use generative AI to generate the game as you play. And it's like, well, we have that. It's just, what you're saying is you want to replace old systems of connecting up, the dots with AI. But the problem is that players like predictability. They like when the rule set is predictable in that way, because then they can strategize. If the rules are not predictable, then, or they're not knowable, maybe is a better way to say it, then what do you really have? For me, a more interesting use of AI in games is to connect up choices with defined actions, right? So take out the algorithm that would connect that up and still have understandable outcomes, but based on the AI choosing that for the player. I don't know. There are ways that it can be done, but I don't really have any interest in using AI for generative reasons. I think that people generally will prefer handwritten outcomes, but with AI that is less predictable not in the way that they don't know the outcomes, but rather they don't know which outcome is going to be chosen. Slight difference in that. Well, either way,
beat you over the head with a Fiend Folio.
Do it. I need it.
And Shadow the Cat, I really hope this answered your question.
Great topic. Great topic. If you guys want to see that one, go give Tim a like and subscribe, please. Of course, Tim, thank you so much for giving us the permission to make these videos. And if you're watching on YouTube, thanks for watching that one. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace.